I'm Gary, and this is Coasting with Culture, which is all about combining theme park visits and riding roller coasters with various cultural experiences around the world. Previously, I had a chance to visit Alton Towers and ride the coasters of their collection, including the excellent Nemesis before its closing. Next, it's on to the coastal town of Blackpool, where a visit to Blackpool Pleasure Beach gives an opportunity to try out several coasters, including the tallest in the country and a few classic wooden coasters. There's also a few other unique rides to try before spending the evening enjoying an annual nighttime festival, which is highlighted by a spectacle of a competition. The weather had been fairly dry for the first few days, but the morning in Blackpool started out with on and off rain. While I wasn't super thrilled about the potential for a wet day, there was one bright side to this weather.
After fairly busy days at Thorpe and Alton Towers, I don't think I'd mind a nice, slower, easygoing day here at Blackpool.
Much of the day would be focused on Blackpool Pleasure Beach, an amusement park that dates back to 1896 and offers one of the largest coaster collections in the United Kingdom, including some extremely rare models. While the park is far from tiny, they certainly found a way to really shoehorn their rides into the park and have multiple cases of coasters crossing over, under, and through their neighbors. I decided to go big for the first coaster of the day, starting with the hyper coaster from Aerodynamics that once stood as the tallest coaster in the world, the Big One. This is one of the United Kingdom's most iconic coasters, stretching nearly the full length of the park, and I was curious to see how this ride compared to other aerodynamic hypers, as I've enjoyed Magnum at Cedar Point the many times I've ridden it, but wasn't particularly fond of Desperado in Nevada. As it turned out, it was somewhere in the middle, because it wasn't as rough as Desperado, but didn't offer the same kind of airtime that Magnum does. While it might be that this ride just doesn't have the same kind of forces, I couldn't help but think that the cooler weather and having multiple rows blocked off could have played a role in the experience as well. So I'd like to come back when the conditions are a bit more favorable and see if this could be a better ride. After that, I went for a lap on one of the 3 tracks of Steeplechase. This is an extremely rare model of coaster, as Aerodynamics had only built 2 of them based on the old Steeplechase coasters of the past, with individual carts, for a lack of a better term, that have a model horse you ride on, and traverse a course like it was a steeplechase-style horse race. Unfortunately, the yellow track never ran during this visit, and the ride broke down when I got back in line for another lap after riding the green track, plus the line got much longer later in the day, so I'll have to come back in the future for the other 2. It seems rare to have a competitive race because of the differing lift hill speeds and minor differences in track layout, but this is still a fun ride that you won't find anywhere else. The trend of riding rare aerodynamic coasters continued with a ride on Revolution, their launch shuttle loop coaster that's one of only 3 operating in the world. Like Sidewinder at Elitch Gardens, the launch is an extreme, but there's a nice pop of air coming from that launch segment and some nice positive G's in the loop, which you then repeat again, going backwards as you return to the station. After having ridden only Aeros so far, the first coaster from a different manufacturer was the mock bobsled coaster, Avalanche. Compared to the other 2 mock bobsleds I've ridden, this one feels like it packs the most punch through its course. It's only about half the length of Bourbon at Heide Park, but has a similar length to Reptilian at King's Dominion, and doesn't have any kind of a mid-course break, so you're pretty much going full speed till the end, helping to make it feel the most like an actual bobsled track. This was followed by a ride on 2 of the park's classic wooden coasters, starting with Blue Flyer, which is a fairly simple junior out and back coaster geared to the families. And right next door is the larger and longer Charles Page designed out and back wooden coaster, Nickelodeon Street, which also gives that classic rickety old ride. From there, I went for a ride on Icon, the park's mock launching coaster that's also Blackpool's newest screen machine. This ride felt like a larger Copperhead Strike, as like its Carolina counterpart, it has some really fun pops of air and part of the course where it whips through some quick directional changes in low to the ground turns, especially in the second half. The next classic wooden coaster was Big Dipper, which had one of the most unique turnaround structures of any coaster I've seen, as the first lift hill and turnaround is part of what I originally thought was only the entrance sign, as I somehow didn't know that it was part of its layout. The ride itself is another fun out and back with some good airtime moments and multiple close encounters with neighboring rides. Speaking of neighboring rides, right next to that was Infusion, their Vekoma SLC, which is placed above a pool with many water features. While this wasn't really any better or worse than your run-of-the-mill SLC, the fountains and waterfall did at least make it far more visually interesting than others out there. To cap off the coaster riding for this stop, I took a lap on both sides of Grand National back-to-back, which was a very pleasant surprise, as there were some really surprising moments of airtime, especially with the double down in the middle of the layout. Definitely a great coaster for the park to keep around as long as possible. With all the coasters that could be ridden that day checked off, I decided to use the rest of the afternoon to catch several of their dark rides, including Ghost Train, a Pretzel Company product that has a chain lift to the second floor and a gravity-based drop in the middle, similar to the old Devil's Den of Conneaut Lake and Haunted House of Camden Park, which were also creations of the Pretzel Company. Depending on your methodology, this might be one that some would contend counts as a coaster credit. After that came the adorable Wallace & Gromit's Thrill-O-Matic. While I haven't seen any of the Wallace & Gromit films, I was at least familiar with the characters and thought this was a fun ride with figures looking like they came right out of the screen and into the ride. I also took a spin on the Derby Racer, as it's the same kind of larger racing carousel as Cedar Downs at Cedar Point, which I've ridden several times. Although I was disappointed to see that they modified the ride to make the horses no longer move forward and backward as it used to. Still, it was neat to take a ride, since this type of carousel has become incredibly rare, with only 3 remaining in the world. My last ride of the day at the park was their Alice in Wonderland Dark Ride, which was a real delight of an older ride. Although I did find it really fascinating that the music playing inside was the instrumental version of Golden Ticket from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Along with the other tracks of Steeplechase, there were several other rides I didn't get a chance to try because of the park's shorter hours and refurbishment projects, such as River Caves and Valhalla, which is scheduled to reopen the following season.
So I may not have gotten all the rides that I hoped to accomplish today. However, that just gives more reason to come back and enjoy this park another day. And just because Pleasure Beach is closing for the night, doesn't mean that the night's over yet. Blackpool is just getting started.
Having the evening free allowed me a chance to check out Blackpool Illuminations, an annual fall tradition of the town that began in 1879, where special light displays are arranged on a 6-mile stretch of the promenade. There's a wide variety in the displays as you make your way up the street, and even the town's streetcars get in on the fun by having their own special light displays that make them look like other modes of transportation. Blackpool Tower also gets in on the act with its own special lighting, as well as a neat free projection show on the building at its base. Across the promenade from the tower is the Comedy Carpet, a neat tribute to British comedy where the path is covered with various jokes and one-liners from many different comedians that call the country home. The area around the carpet was quite busy this evening though, as many had come for one of the main draws of Illuminations, the annual World Fireworks Championship Blackpool, a special competition between various pyrotechnic display groups to put on the best fireworks show. This evening's presentation came from the Fireworks Factory of Finland. While the fireworks capped off the night for many who came to see them, I still had one last stop back down at the South Pier, as they offered a chance to ride one last coaster before heading back to the hotel. And that was a standard Reverchon spinning mouse called Crazy Coaster. While the ride itself is pretty much on par with the others of this model, it had the unique placement on top of metal grates that allowed you to see the waves of the Irish Sea below. The festivities of this event were a great way to cap off the day of riding coasters and more at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and the following day would be a chance to visit one last larger park of England before getting into the final stretch of this trip. Thank you for watching this Coastin' with Culture video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and click the subscribe button below to see future videos here on YouTube, like these ones which you may enjoy as well. Additional content can be found at coastinwithculture.com, and you can also follow Coastin' with Culture on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for announcements, previews, and updates. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, take care and safe travels.